Census. Watch a count, yeah. Wonder what you count, yeah. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, information needed to develop the community. Them scouts them out and I get the reports. So don't bother hide when you see them. Yeah, we are gonna start from east. Hey, then we reach a west. Hey, the process easy. Yo, wanna please don't stress, cause guess what? Me count, you count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Census. Census say all information needed to develop the community. Them scouts them out and I get the reports. So don't bother hide when you see them.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Statistical Institute of Jamaica's quarterly press briefing. My name is Georgia Garvey Green. Today, our Director General, Ms. Carol Coy, will be presenting a number of key statistical indicators for the period. Following Ms. Coy's presentation, we will take your questions. We ask that you use the raised icon feature and wait until you are identified. Without further delay, let me hand over to Ms. Carol Coy.
Thanks, Georgia. In accordance with STATIN's advanced release calendar, we will be releasing the key indicators from the September 2022 Consumer Price Index, the January to June 2022 International Merchandise Trade Statistics, and the July 2022 Labor Force Survey. We will also highlight some of the main economic indicators from the recently released second quarter 2022 GDP and provide an update on the 2022 census. Starting with the gross domestic product. For the second quarter of 2022, that is April to June, the Jamaican economy grew by 4.8% when compared to the corresponding quarter of 2021. The growth in the economy resulted from an increase of 7.2% in value added at constant prices for the services industries. However, the value added of the goods producing industries declined by 2%. Contributing to the improvement in the performance of the economy for the second quarter were the removal of measures that were implemented to limit the spread of COVID-19, such as the revocation of the Disaster Risk Management Order, the expiration of the COVID-19 pre-test requirement for travel to the island, and the reopening of the entertainment sector. When compared to the first quarter of 2022, that is the January to March, total value added at constant prices increased by 1.3%, a continuation of the trend observed since the third quarter of 2020. Looking now at the performance of the services industries, the value added for all services industries increased during the period when compared to the second quarter of 2021. Hotels and restaurants grew by 56%, impacted by the 79.2% increase in foreign national arrivals to the island during the period. The wholesale and retail trade, repairs, installation of machinery and equipment grew by 7.6%, transport, storage, and communication by 5.7%, and other services, which includes the entertainment and tourism-related activities, grew by 9.8%. Finance and insurance services, 1.1%. Real estate, renting, and business activities increased by 2.1%. Producers of government services, 0.4%. And electricity and water supply by 2%. The performance of the goods producing industries saw a decline in this segment of the economy, and it was largely due to lower output levels in mining and quarrying of 62.5% and construction of 5.2%. The continued closure of the Jamalco plant adversely affected the performance of the mining and quarrying industry. However, agriculture, forestry and fishing, and manufacturing grew during the quarter by 6.3% and 5.6% respectively. We will now turn to the Consumer Price Index. The CPI, as we have been emphasizing, measures the changes in the general level of the prices of consumer goods and services purchased by private households. The inflation rate for September 2022 was 1.4% and was mainly impacted by a 4.1% rise in the index for the division housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels. The rise in this division's index was impacted by the 9.2% increase in the group electricity, gas, and other fuels. This resulted mainly from the cessation of the Government of Jamaica's 20% subsidy on electricity bills for customers who use 200 kilowatts per hour or less. The inflation rate was also impacted by a 1.1% rise in the index for the division food and non-alcoholic beverages, primarily attributable to higher prices of items within the class: vegetables, tubers, plantains, cooking bananas, and pulses. The index for this class increased by 3.5%. Additionally, there was an increase of 5.3% in the index for the education division, resulting from higher tuition fees charged by private primary level institutions. The point-to-point inflation rate as at September 2022 was 9.3%. This inflation rate was mainly attributable to increases in the index for the divisions food and non-alcoholic beverages, which went up by 10.5%, housing, water, electricity, gas, and fuels, which increased by 8.5%, and restaurants and accommodation services, which increased by 19.4%. We will now turn to the international merchandise trade for the period January to June 2022. Total spending on imports for the first half of the year amounted to approximately $3.8 billion, an increase of 37.4% when compared to the corresponding 2021 period. This increase was largely attributable to higher imports of fuels and lubricants, raw materials, intermediate goods, and consumer goods, which went up by 70.7%, 28.5%, and 33.8% respectively. Revenues from total exports amounted to $801 million, an increase of 2.3% relative to the comparable 2021 period. Domestic exports accounted for 82.3% of total exports and were valued at $659.6 million, a decline of 3.3%. The decline in domestic exports was due to a 65.5% decline in the value of alumina exports. The manufacturing industry, however, exports from the manufacturing industry, however, increased by 32.2% due to a 60.4% increase in the exports of refined petroleum products. We will now turn to the July 2022 labor force. Today's release highlights the findings of the July 2022 labor force survey. This survey was conducted during the period July to September, with the reference week being June 19th to 25th. For July 2022, there were 1,357,700 persons in the labor force, and this was an increase of 30,200 or 2.3% compared to the 1,327,500 in July 2021. The increase was mainly in the female labor force, which grew by 27,400. The male labor force only increased by 2,800. Looking at the employed labor force, there were 1,268,000 employed persons in July, and this is an increase of 53,000 persons or 4.4%. Females accounted for the larger proportion of the increase in employment, 79.2% or 42,200. There were 579,500 employed females in July, compared to 537,500 in the similar quarter of 2021. Males, on the other hand, increased by 11,000 to 688,500. Youth employment also showed strong growth, with employed youth aged 14 to 24 years increasing by 18,800. Of this increase, females 20 to 24 years accounted for 80.3% or 15,100. With the exception of the skilled agriculture and fishery workers and elementary occupations, employment in all occupation groups increased in July. Of note, clerks, service workers, and shop and market sales workers, and craft and related trade workers had the largest increases. A comparison of the July quarters of 2022 and 2021 showed that the group clerks, which includes customer services clerks, contact center information clerks, and inquiry clerks, increased by 25,400 to 132,200. This was the largest increase in employment among occupation groups, with females accounting for the majority of the increase, 16,100 or 63.4%. The group service workers and shop and market sales workers increased by 21,400, moving to 290,700. Again, females accounted for the larger increase, 18,100 or 84.6%. Within this group, there are personal service workers such as waiters, bartenders, and hairdressers, and also sales workers such as street food vendors, store, supermarket, and shop clerks, and cashier and ticket clerks. The craft and related trade workers group, which include groups such as masons and plumbers, increased by 9,600 to 157,200. Unlike the other two occupation groups, the largest increase was for males, which was 6,600 or 68.8%. Looking now at the labor force by industry, the largest increase in employment was in the following industries: real estate and renting and business activities, accommodation and food service activities, and construction. Employment in the real estate and renting business activities, which includes administrative and support service activities such as call centers, packaging, and general cleaning of building activities, increased by 21,700. Of this increase, females accounted for more than three-quarters, 16,800. Accommodation and food services had the second largest increase of 12,400, of which 11,200 or 90.3% were females. Accommodation and food beverage serving activities include accommodation in hotels, guest houses, short stay lodging, restaurants, fast food outlets, and canteens. When we look at the wider tourism-related sector, which is much more than the accommodation and food service, here you're including your attractions and the transport sector, employment increased by 21,400, and this represents 40.2% of the increase in the employed labor force. The largest increase in male employment for the July quarter was in the industry group construction, which increased by 6,700 or 5.8%. We will now turn to unemployment. The data showed that in July 2022, there were 89,700 unemployed persons, and this is 22,800 fewer compared to July 2021. The number of unemployed males decreased by 8,100. There was, however, a larger decline in the number of unemployed females of 14,700. The unemployment rate for the quarter was 6.6%, and this is a 1.9 percentage point decline compared to July 2021. The male unemployment rate was 5.2%, representing a 1.1 percentage point decline. For females, the unemployment rate was 8.2%. This represents a 2.8 percentage points decline compared to July 2021. There were 14,300 fewer unemployed persons between the age group 20 to 24 years, and this accounted for 62.7% of the total decline in the number of unemployed persons. The youth unemployment rate was 16.7% compared to 23.9% in July 2021. I will now give an update on the 2022 population and housing census. As you would have realized, data collection for Jamaica's 15th population and housing census commenced in September 13, 2022. Census Day was September 2012. I'll report that census takers are now deployed in the western and central parishes. As we would have explained, the data collection was done on a staggered basis starting in the west and will move right across the island. The Institute takes this opportunity to encourage everyone to cooperate with the census takers when they visit your household, as the information being collected is of critical importance for the development of our country. Census data not only provide critical information to inform policy and decision-making within the central and local government, but is used extensively by other stakeholders such as the business community, researchers, academia, NGOs, and our students. We therefore look forward to the participation and continued support of everyone living in Jamaica. In closing, we continue to acknowledge the work of the Institute's management and staff. We thank the respondents who continue to participate in the various household and business surveys that we conduct on a monthly or quarterly basis. The ongoing contribution of the various ministries, departments, and agencies is also appreciated. We reiterate the need for continuous participation in our surveys and in the 2022 population and housing census. The public can rest assured that the information provided to the Institute is treated with the strictest confidentiality, as STATIN collects and publishes data in accordance with the provisions of the Statistics Act. We encourage everyone to visit our website at statinja.gov.jm for all the tables associated with today's releases and for further information on the 2022 census. You count, me count, all are we count. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coy. Are there any questions? Just checking to see if there are any questions from any of our participants. If there are any questions, could you kindly use the raised icon feature? Okay. All right, there seems to be no question. Hope I'm not overlooking anyone. Just one final check. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Coy, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for participating or attending today's quarterly press briefing. As Ms. Coy said, please check our website for the tables from today's releases, and also visit our website for information on the census. Follow our social media pages as well, and see you for our next quarterly press briefing. Thanks, and do have a wonderful day.
Census. Watch a count, yeah. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Information needed to develop the community. Them scouts them out and I get the reports, so don't bother hide when you see them. Yeah, we are gonna start from east. Hey, then we reach a west. Hey, the process easy. Yo, wanna please don't stress, cause guess what? Me count, you count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Census. Watch a count, yeah. Watch a count, yeah. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Information needed to develop the community. Them scouts them out and I get the reports, so don't bother hide when you see them. Yeah, we are gonna start from east. Hey, then we reach a west. Hey, the process easy. Yo, wanna please don't stress, cause guess what? Me count, you count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Hey, you count, me count. Census say all of we count. Census.